I'll call the School Building Committee 2020 to order at 6:36, I believe is the correct time.
6:32.
Oh, 32, excuse me, I'm sorry. Present with us in the room here, we have Greg Carabine, William Hull, Joe DeLucia, Stacy Gould, and Tara Booker, our Director of Human Services. And joining us through Zoom, we have Mark Kulos, Mark Betancourt, Cindy Beauregard,
Christine.
oh, I'm sorry, Christine DeStacio.
Quite all right, Steve.
Well, I'm looking at a very small screen.
I know you are. That's why I was helping.
Thank you. I believe that's all the members that we have presently. Is there anyone who's a committee member that I missed that's on Zoom that I can't see?
Doesn't look like it. It's there's 4 of us on Zoom.
All right, so we have a quorum. First order of business will be the approval of the minutes from the Tuesday, April 19th meeting. Everybody should have gotten them by email.
Mark Kulos, make a motion to accept as presented.
I'll second.
Second by Bill Hull. Any corrections, additions, deletions that we need to be made aware of?
Christine, I'm sorry. I looked at him earlier. The part of when oh, never mind. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about tomorrow's meeting. I accept them.
Okay, hearing none. I guess we have to do this by roll call. Mark Betancourt,
Yes.
William Hull,
Yes.
Peter Gauthier. Oh no, Peter's not here. I'm sorry.
Peter's trying to get in. I just resent him the
Oh.
link.
Okay, Christine DeStacio,
Yes.
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes,
Mark Kulos,
Yes,
Lucia,
Yes.
and myself. Is there anyone from the public who would like to make a comment to the committee this evening? Anyone who would like to make a public comment this evening? Third and final time, anyone who would like to make public comment to the committee this evening? Hearing and seeing no one, I'll declare public comment closed. We'll move on to the next piece of business, which is an update from DRA. And I'll turn it over to Jim or Greg. Okay.
Could we put the microphone in the middle there, Joe?
So hold on.
Can't
one
hear
second.
him.
So the microphone will not connect to my MacBook
Oh, really?
through Bluetooth. It might.
And I appreciate everyone's indulgence while we work through these Zoom technology.
Is that working here? Mark, can you hear that better?
Not great.
Not
I can make it out.
Okay.
Is he speaking now? No?
No, we're connecting the microphone.
Okay, just checking, making sure I'm not missing something.
Greg, I see your device is muted. Maybe if you turn your device on, the audio.
it's gonna come up CP like 2551. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And you gotta select the microphone in Zoom. Once it's paired.
If it identified it.
Okay. So.
So what you do is you choose that for the microphone and the speaker. In Zoom.
And you'll be talking to them.
Okay. That working, Mark?
All right, that sounds a lot better.
Super.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Can
get
you
through
hear,
all the way.
can you hear me okay?
Excellent, yes, as if you're in the room.
Or
Just so if I could, Stacy, just to let everyone know, I came down with COVID last week and I've pretty much recovered, fortunately, but I have no desire to possibly expose anyone to any of the residual effects. So that's why I'm attending remotely. Thank you.
Happy you're feeling better, Mark.
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine. They let me come.
Happy
They
you're
let me go
feeling-
to work today, actually.
Oh, all righty.
So I
Intimidate
was-
them, not us.
Yeah, but I'm just, yeah, no, I wore a mask all day and the whole 9 yards, so it's, but I'm social distance and all that stuff, but in there, it's a little more difficult, so I didn't want to get into that, so.
All right, guys, we have a 5-point agenda. We have the first item up, which is a review of our meeting from the 26th. That was our second workshop. That evening was recorded. However, I have not yet seen any copy of the video, and that's something that we would like to put our hands on. I think it would also be a good idea for this committee to have a copy of it. What we can do with it is edit it down so that we can put some segments out on your project website to share with the community should they have interest in seeing it.
Yeah,
So can somebody help me make contact with the folks over at Kelly to get hold of that?
Yes.
if I may, Stacy,
Yes.
I did reach out to Amber, and supposedly they were cutting it onto into media, probably a CD or DVD or whatever. They were going to burn it onto that. So I haven't heard back, but you know, I was a little waylaid last week, so I know I touched base with them in the beginning of last week about that, and I haven't heard anything more. So we'll have to do some follow up to see if we can't get that.
All right, I'll see if I can reach Amber tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Just quickly, this table and those online with us this evening, any first comments relative to positives or negatives coming out of the workshop?
Well,
I thought the materials and my presentation was great. I didn't think that we were totally prepared for questions, comments, concerns, and then, but you know, we just didn't get the turnout that we were looking for. But there was good dialogue nonetheless.
Sure. And I think the video is something that can help you there. It can still help push that message out and allow people to hear the conversation that did happen that evening. Any specific areas that need to be addressed that came away from that, from anybody at the table, or specific areas of concern?
The presentation?
Yes.
No, I'll echo Joe that we need to get people there. I mean, that to do a great presentation and nobody's there, you might as well take a walk in the woods and talk to trees. That's not your fault. I don't think that's DRA, but we need to get public relations out and about, especially in a city this size. I think that what we need to do is almost bring this presentation to other groups, and could be senior citizens, could be VFW, could be every PTA. All those things need to be had to start to build some momentum.
Okay.
I mean, the article in the paper was okay, right?
Yeah.
But I think we just need to do a lot more than we're doing.
We've got an upcoming public meeting Jim and I were talking about, and we have it for the 5th item tonight. Perhaps what you're talking about is a way of breaking it down and taking it out to people instead of trying to get people into a room. We have to look at that relative to the overall schedule and getting this complete and into council on time.
Having done this before in another district, we went on the road. Right? Anybody that would listen to us. So, I mean, we were at an opening of an envelope, just so we could have a discussion with people, and it drove those votes to where we wanted to drive them, because we had broken down all the financials, and it made financial sense to do what we have. Right now, one article in the paper isn't going to do you.
Yep.
And when there were very few PTO members there, you know, that's a problem. So those are the people we need to get.
Let me ask you a question, Bill. When you did that,
Can I just interject one
Oh,
second?
I'm sorry.
So, no, I should apologize to you, but Claire Bissett from the Day has asked that when anybody speaks, that you identify yourself, right? So that last person was Bill Hull that was speaking. And then I also have a comment here from the rec department that I'll wait for till after.
okay. So my question is, when you took your show on the road, so to speak, was it the final plan? Here it is, this is what we're proposing? Or was it, here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C?
Final plan.
Final plan.
Final plan and why it made financial sense.
Okay, so,
And we had a PowerPoint presentation, so it was the same presentation every time we gave it, because it was on a PowerPoint, and it made sense. Once you put it out there and the voters say no, that's one thing. But if you don't put it out there and the voters say no, then I think we missed an opportunity.
right, but I think the difference here is that we have this plan, this, you know,
We have to make a
column A,
decision.
B, and C, which one do you want? And I think it's harder when you're have all of these options than to take it on the road and say, okay, here's our plan.
But I guess this is Jim Barrett speaking. I would not necessarily agree with that position. I mean, we have to explore a wide array of options at this juncture.
Yes.
When it comes time, and this is what Greg is speaking to, it's item, well, it was item 5 on the agenda. It's where we're heading next, which is the next workshop. At that point, you will have it funneled down to a recommended solution. It's not final, it's a suggested recommended, and we get input from the community based on that. And from there, we create a final recommendation for the city. So I think we're going to get you to that same place that Bill was, because we know the authors of that study.
You'll be at that point by the end of tonight. You'll have everything, pretty much everything that you need to say, let's go in this direction. So then the question for the next meeting is do it as a public informational meeting where we'll run through what's essentially the draft report. Ask for input from the public at that time, wrap it into a final, and then take it on the road the way the two of you are talking.
But even at that next meeting, we need to drive people there.
Yeah, I agree that the first two meetings were too lightly attended for a city of this size and a project of this scope. It's and probably no one's fault, but it hurts the project because now it's trying to gain traction and people start to look at it and say, well, you already made the decisions.
Right.
And that becomes another hill to climb.
Just this is Joe DeLucia speaking, but just a thought from Cheryl Hansen, our rec director. She said that she says we have a lot of parents at youth sports tournaments and games at night and weekends, and the committee could have a booth just to get in touch with her to coordinate that. Be another way to get information out, even if it's just information about the next public session.
Yeah, this is Greg Caroline. I have a question. Now, we keep pushing the decision of which way to go month to month. When do you need us to say, we'd like this option?
Right?
We need to.
So, I mean, because last meeting, Peter Gauthier was very good. He says, we didn't want to task you, say we'd like option A. We wanted to get public input. We don't have enough public input. So what point do you have to go forward?
I think that what you got, Greg, now is we're confident with the work we did with the superintendent's office on the educational side. I talked for quite a while with DPW in between the two meetings. They have a pretty good understanding of the sites that are available. And what we're going to go through tonight is take you to what we think is the direction that you should go. And there are a couple of decisions that we need from you guys tonight, and then that will turn the corner on the financial cost projection piece of it. We were hopeful that we would get a little bit more engagement at that second meeting, mostly around the number of schools type of question. And there wasn't enough there to draw us off of where we were heading on what we would recommend for schools.
So what I'm hearing is you're going to give a presentation tonight. You're going to want the board to say, that's the option we'd like to go with.
Which you've actually been doing after each meeting at each time.
Okay.
It just started out with a whole bunch of choices.
Okay, let me say what we talked about last time, basically 3 different combinations of schools.
Yep.
So tonight you're looking for us to say, we'd like 3, 5, 7, pick a number.
Last time we came in with 3, we went out with 2. So tonight we're back with 2. And then we threw in some site discussion.
Are your cost analysis embedded in that? Well, I think that's one of the things we need. We need to have the cost before you make that decision.
We can develop some costs pretty quickly based off of there's 2 wild cards on cost is the approach of new versus renovate and which sites you go to. So we can jump into that and come back around to this when we talk about next steps if you want. Just get to where I can control the slideshow again. So talk about site evaluations, and this was a piece that might look a little bit onerous, but here's how we're set up now, right? We all know 14 buildings, 7 elementaries, 2 middles, and then this is our population center. We have the major one, which is focused around the downtown, and a minor one up near Volcanic. And these are your steady rental properties. They're the properties that don't really change or move out much at all. And then we look at where the schools are. They're all out in the periphery of the of those population centers, which is pretty typical for districts that evolved through the baby boom and brought some older schools with them, but maybe gave up on the downtown schools as you grew through the 50s and 60s and you moved out and kind of chased population. And now we are to the point of our population growth is pretty steady across the city, but our population density is also just as steady on those two more urban areas. So we looked at how we can get 3 schools to work most effective way. And so we're looking for 3 elementary school sites, 2 middle schools, transition services in the admin building. For west side of downtown, just to make it easy, the Case Street is 18 to 22. And we'll say that piece is settled, that was moved in this year. Huntington, we'll move to be the admin center. So we'll centralize administrative function there. I've got Franklin Street. So if it's blue and underlined, it's a new site to consider. Teachers Middle School, which it just needs some renovation. Stanton and Uncas as elementary schools for sites to consider, sites you own now. On the east side of downtown, Moriarty, then Ox Hill Road, which is right across the street from Kelly, and Golden Street, AKA Greenville School. So those are, the focus tonight is really those 6 elementary schools sites, and going at it from the point of view of getting to 3 schools is driven more by the educational size of the school. At 3 schools function better for an educational point of view than the size of the school at 4 schools. I'm talking 700 students as opposed to 5.25 or 550. So our conceptual program, looking back once again, our working program for 700 students, 95,000 square feet. For 525 students, it's 75,000 square feet. So it's about a 20,000 square foot difference. So if you build 3 schools in round numbers at 100,000 square feet, you're about 300,000 square feet. If you build 4 schools at 75,000 in round numbers, you're at 300,000 square feet. So you own the same amount of square footage. You just own an additional site and you own additional staff. Plus you own a building program that doesn't really comport with educational desires. So we'll walk you through a couple of scenarios here, and we're going to show you the site, where it is relative to your population center. That's the first slide. Second slide is just going to be from your tax maps, and we'll look at how the site's configured. Then we'll look at natural influences, terrain, wetlands, floodplain, and then how a test fit may fit on that site. And we're looking at it from 2 points of view. On those that we think you might be tempted to renovate and add to, we'll show you a potential, which is basically a box that tells you where you could add. For those where we think a new school might be considered, we'll show you a conceptual floor plan on each one of those sites. So Moriarty, we know a building set very similar to Uncas has been added on once before. It has the ball field in this upper right-hand corner there towards the top. Relatively flat site, good access. We have a wetlands area off to the west, the upper left-hand side of the slide. And we do have a band of 5% slope that runs across the site. It doesn't make up a lot of elevation change, but it is relatively steep. And it comes off right at the back of the playground and across the south edge of the baseball diamond. There's a potential to add on an area for gymnasium, and what we saw in the program for the building is a need for about 20,000 square feet. So it's a gymnasium, gross motor skills room, and some art and other support rooms. This building tends to work against itself because it has about 4,000 square feet of library, which is a double height space that doesn't really lend itself to being broken into much of anything else. So renovation at this building is probably going to come at a bit more cost than a straightforward renovation to a more conventional floor plan may come. And we do know that classroom wing A, the one to the lower left, is still the open plan form. It has no demising walls in it. So it's a good amount of real estate there. But we're saying for a way to get closer to what we would need is to perhaps build a new classroom wing that's parallel to classroom wing B, the one going towards the top of the page here, and then add a gymnasium at the back. The effect of this is to look at, can you rationalize the entrance and access to the building? As you come into the main building and then you go through the library to get to the classroom wing, or you go through the gymnasium to get back out. So it's not the easiest building to administer, and certainly not an easy building to modify. We then looked at what might you do if you were to build new. And this comes with the benefit of keeping the construction away from the building. So if you're going to do a full renovation, you need to get everybody out of the building. So you need swing space. And with that, this relocation, dislocation, you're looking about 1.5 to 2 years of school time where everyone's displaced somewhere else. So we looked at the potential of building on the baseball field and getting a new 2-story building on that field, and then taking the old building down and rebuilding a new baseball field. Now, the advantage you'd have to this is multifold. One, you could get an actual bus and parent drop-off loop through the building. You could get parking that would accommodate your needs at that site. You'd get the baseball field oriented in a more desirable orientation for youth. You want youth play to be pitching southwest and hitting northeast, so that the batter's not looking into the sun. And so just turning that field, putting it from the western corner inwards, also gives you a rectangular field that's about the size of a youth soccer field with some parking around it. So you could build this floor plan on that site with the main school working and running all the way through it, and then take it down, take the existing building down, build the fields, and be done with it as a standalone project. So that is a evaluation of Moriarty with 2 approaches that we saw might get you to where we need to get to. Go to Stanton, and once again, we're on that outer edge. We're in the darker color population ring, so we're getting pretty close to where we want to be, but we're not quite there yet. This is a relatively big site, about 24 acres. It doesn't read like that when you look at all the topography and the wetlands that are on it. The majority of the site's behind the building, and you can see from the town's GIS, there is a wetlands area immediately adjacent to the site. The blue is a 100-year floodplain. That we know that that's a piped stream that runs under it, but the 100-year floodplain does still come up on the maps as a potential for flooding. The fact that no one we talk to has ever seen it flood pretty much tells me that it's being generated by the elevations on either side of the pipe and not by the actual pipe. The brown bands back further are 2 to 5% slope. So 2% is your limits for parking lots and whatnot across slope. So still a very workable area. If you've been out to site and you walk to the back of the field, you know you've walked up the 2 to 5% slope. Further back, you're up in more than 5%. So it starts to get a bit steeper up there, and then a nice plateau of 2 to 5% right near that knuckle or notch in the property line there. We looked at a couple of different ways to potentially work this, and the first is to put a single-story building, and these are showing at about 90,000, 95,000 square feet. So it's a pretty close approximation of what you might ultimately build. And this is backing up on the existing field and up against that 2 to 5% slope, and using the as much of the existing parking as possible. It does limit the playfield ability around the site. We can't get a big soccer field sized field up anywhere close to the building. You could go up into the back on that that flat area and get it up there, but then you're relatively far away from the building at that point. So we looked at 2 stories and using the same footprint that we just showed at Moriarty. This allows us some room to work, parking where the existing building is. It gives you a longer bus loop, a longer parent drop off, and gets a slightly larger field for the 2 to 5 year old kids on the bottom center, and then a larger field up top. And then once we moved the field up top, we started saying, what happened if you move the building back a little bit? So we start to work with the slope, and the building starts to go up the slope. And that allows us to move 2 larger fields down onto the flat. So we're not excavating or moving rock to build a field, we're building it down on the flat where the building is now. Bus drop-off gets longer, drop-off gets longer, parking gets closer to the building, and it also moves far enough back onto the site that it opens up the possibility of outdoor learning areas on that flatter area back in on the property there. So this site seems to come together pretty well for a 2-story building. Certainly accommodates all the programmatic space. We then looked at Uncas as much for the location as anything else. It's a I don't know, 11-acre site, a little bit over 11 acres, so it comes pretty close to our 17-acre target, and it has some real potential for us, we think. It has a fairly poor parking layout, parent drop-off, bus drop-off, mostly because the building's hogging the site instead of working with it. And that's just where it was built in a day when the majority of the population probably would have walked to the school from the surrounding neighborhoods. And we're now designing sites for a different reality. It has a fair amount of 5% slope on it. If you've had to walk up the hill to the upper playground, you know what we're talking about. It's a pretty good hill. Picks up almost 20 feet in elevation in that ramp, up 18 and a half feet. Has a couple of lesser slopes, but nothing really that's not workable, because it does have the flats where the 2 fields are that give us some potential. We looked at adding to this. This portion that you see in white is the original building. It's the same building that is Moriarty without the addition, the B-wing addition. This actually needs more space added to it to get up to our program. And it would start to impinge on the hill to the south, to the left of the drawing. But it also started to pose some question of, if you were to increase this building and increase the population, would the logistics of pickup drop-off actually work? And frankly, we don't think it would, given the population that's there now. To increase the population to our target would make that pickup drop-off sequence quite difficult. So we looked at, once again, taking our 2-story footprint and moving it back onto the site, taking advantage of the hill. And we would use that the upper field, and expand the lower field down around the building. This lets you actually take the Elizabeth Street extension and just straighten it out and make it a road, if you wanted to. But it gives you a long loop down for a bus drop-off, and then an inner loop inside of that for parent drop-off and some parking, and really moves the building back to a much more workable location, given the narrow neck at the start of the site. So we think Moriarty, Stanton, and Uncas all quite workable for the sites where they are. And when we come down to which ones to develop further, it would be more location relative to population to kind of judge that. So then we looked at 3 sites that came up in my discussions, not only with the committee here, but also with Pat McLaughlin at DPW over the intervening time here. And 3 that came up as having real potential, we'll go through now. The first is Ox Hill Road, and I've got two concerns with this. One is its location. It's about as far away from the population center that we're trying to serve as any of the sites that we looked at. So geographically undesirable is the nice way to say it. It's right across from Kelly, as you know, and the technical high school right behind the senior center. It has the track. It also has a fair amount of topography. Once again, the red is more than 5%. It goes up a pretty darn good hill and it goes down the other side into the park. It does have a good ridge line that would allow you to connect from the south to the north along the ridge. And so we looked at what might happen if you put a single-story building, and you can see we have to hug the ridge line in order to get a single-story building to work. And it's a relatively long road. So a lot of road, a lot of site work for an elementary school, and not really where we want the building to be, and we don't own it. So put all that together, and I think you know where we're going with that one. The second one, Pat refers to it as Golden Street. I know everyone here has been referring to it as Greenville. So we'll go with however most of the city will know it. Right now, I've got it parenthetical as Greenville. And no doubt why we like this one. It is right where we need a school. It's right in the population center. The city owns the major parcel, and then the parcel to the north that goes out to Boswell. Interestingly enough, it has a couple of right-of-ways that are not developed that could actually provide some relief from the local roads for bus and parent access to the site as you develop a plan, if you go this way. This, as no surprise, we're a riverfront community, has a lot of topography to work with again, and virtually the entire site is greater than 5%. And coming off of Boswell, it actually goes up pretty sharp and then starts to drop in. So this is why they invented dynamite and big equipment. It's one of those sites that you would say it's probably worth doing the math, given its location and the fact that you own it, relative to how you might develop it. For giggles, we put a single-story building on it. I don't think it's worth spending any time on that. We put a two-story building on it up on the top of the ridge, knowing that you could adjust going down or up to get floors to work, and put a crossing road from Golden Street over to Boswell with parking and bus drop-offs and fields in adjacent to the kindergarten, early childhood end of the building, and then down on the flat below it. And then took one other look where we moved the building down the hill, thinking that the site deserves a little bit more study. So two different locations. They both seem to work quite well.
This one's single story, the other, or excuse me, double story.
Yeah.
The other one was single story. I think it came out different.
Yeah, the first one was single. Then there's two doubles that we shifted, and remember, to take care of the topography. So this one, everything is stacked up. And this one goes, uses Golden Street and then uses the unbuilt right-of-way to the west, to the left on the drawing. So it doesn't fight the grade to get all the way over to Boswell. It kind of comes down on the grade. And it's so as a proof of concept, I think it's a site with a lot of potential. You go into it knowing that it has some grade to work with. And then an interesting one that Pat brought up was Franklin Street, right? Pretty much right across the street here. Once again, it's pretty close to the center of our population growth. It's a little bit closer to the commercial end of downtown than we would typically look for, but it makes an interesting study. It's you own the small parcel just to the north of it, and then you have the essentially unused factory piece sitting there between Chestnut Street and Franklin Street, so everybody can get an idea of where you are, and you can see it if you just go outside. It is, once again, got some slope on it. It also has a 100-year floodplain from another piped river. And it's I don't think anyone remembered ever flooding, but the fact that it still shows up that way will put some regulatory limitations on you. This would probably be 3 stories, 3-floor school, with a field and some parking on site. If it were the typical urban school layout, and it would could accommodate a play area on the roof, pretty common in urban districts. It would feel different than the other sites that we looked at in how it felt when you went there. And I think if the toss up was made between this and Greenville, Greenville is going to feel far more like whatever else you might build. So when we start to talk about parity of experience and parity of feeling between the buildings, that becomes one of the factors that you start to look at. So this was our site criteria, just to give you a run through again. For Moriarty, we're 3 acres short, but certainly workable, as we saw. Stanton, we're 7 acres over and just about workable. Uncas, we're 5 acres under, but probably workable based on that quick concept. Greenville's about, call it 3 acres under. And because of the odd shape, you'd be working on that site to get a big field, but I'm not sure that a big should be the driver for what you're trying to do either. Ox Hill is about 10.5 acres bigger, and it probably reads like about a 15-acre site when you get done with all the topography. And then Franklin Street's about 14.5 acres under what was needed. So we started this by saying what we need is some concurrence on 3 schools or 4, and then how many of the existing sites and how many new sites, that so we can say to our cost estimators, take this footprint, put it on that site in this type of location, pretty much what we just ran through. So I've got no problem going back through those slides to get everybody comfortable again with the idea. But it's, from the educational point of view, the 3 schools, 700 students was what was coming out of Dr. Stringfellow's office and programming with her. If you drop down to 525, it gives you an odd break between upper elementary and lower elementary. So what we were looking at was a 350 student lower grade level alignment, upper grade level alignment. Those are the programs we put together from there. The good thing is, if you say 4 schools, you still have enough sites to choose from. And you end up then saying, is it Moriarty, Stanton, Uncas, and Greenville? And that just becomes a decision you make from there. You'll end up building about the same amount of square footage. You'll have more site costs, and you'll have more operational costs as you go forward.
Questions, comments?
Yes, Christine here. This is far out left field, but I'm just concerned about veterans being shut down because of the busing that'll have to happen for those kids. I wanted to ask, I see Mayor Nystrom is on. Does he know, Peter, do you know what's happened with the veterans of the VFW up on Laurel Hill? Who owns that now?
It's privately owned, the American Legion.
Oh, they do. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking veterans. I know. So they
Mel
still
Weiss.
own it?
Mel Weiss is one of the owners of the property. I'm not sure who the other party is.
Yeah, when I drove by that earlier today, I'm like, oh my God, that would be, you know, and you could draw kids from downtown also. And then the kids from the east side and the kids from Laurel Hill. But I'm just putting it out there because I just feel that that means if we go with, it does look like Golden Street, it's looking like the best site for the new school, you know, the old Greenville site, since you have increased the accessibility, which was what I was worried about with that site. But I'm just thinking about all those kids from Laurel Hill and the entire east side and where they'll be heading, you know, bus-wise, because there's a lot of kids up in the Laurel Hill area, which is the Veterans District.
Right, Christine, this is Greg Smalley from DRA.
Yes, Greg.
When we looked at veterans, there's 2 things. The existing site we know is too small, and it drops off.
Oh, I know.
Into
Yeah, I know that was out as far as where it is.
Yep. And acquisition of property is one that adds cost and typically time. But it's also, from a planning point of view, it's pretty much right at the edge of the city. And so
Yes.
you're busing you're busing to a point at the edge, which we typically try to avoid doing unless there's greater land development potential in that area. And we don't really see that either. So veterans, from a planning point of view, wasn't really making the grade as much as Uncas does.
Oh, yes. No, I understood that part, Greg, as far as weighing each of them. But like I said, my concern is the buzzing because Veterans is fairly close to downtown. That's the only thing. You know, the distance is not far. And it's a main road that brings you up there. But I know that site is off. I know that off the sure. But I'm just thinking about the kids, and you know, that's the part I don't like because they lost the east side. Bishop, you know, shut down years ago, and I forget if it was around when Greenville closed. And you know, and then if we shut down the school on the Laurel Hill area, that's what I'm concerned about. I don't know if we could check into what the purchase amount would even be. Pete Nystrom would have a much better idea of that than I do, but you know, I'm just trying to think of some way to make everybody happy. I know that's impossible, but thinking about the kids.
But we don't know how big, I don't know how big that site is, number one. Number two.
Yeah, it's pretty
13
big.
acres.
Yeah, I'll see. You know, I knew it was pretty large.
It's 13 acres. There are environmental issues, including the fact that Thermos King Sealy used it as a dumping site for crushed glass from the Glass House Productions.
Oh, I didn't realize that, Pete.
The city did do an environmental phase 1 utilizing the EPA dollars that we were awarded a couple of years ago. So we have some initial data on that. But as far as a phase 2 and cleanup costs, we do not have. I would also mention that the Franklin Street site, I believe, is now considered floodway, which is much worse than floodplain. And that had to do with the fact of the dam breaking back in '63, high velocity water and the damage and things that cause. And that underground large stream, whatever you want to call it, that's, I don't think you want to mess with that and rebuild new foundations above that. I think it might collapse. It's a brick inlaid conduit, 12-foot diameter that runs underneath that whole area, transfers into Bath Street, which is where the flooding took place. The same time the Bacchus Hospital had the flooding. That's a problem site, along with the environmental issues the current building houses as well. It's quite a brownfield site to begin with. Personally, I think Greenville offers quite an opportunity.
Anyone else who has any comments? Questions?
Yeah, it's Mark Betancourt. I certainly like the idea of being in Greenville as far as, close to the population goes. I don't really have a horse in this race. But I think that if we were to build a new school, but from what we're looking at, some of the concepts we're looking at, we're talking about building new schools, period. We're not talking about renovation of the current properties, basically because the logistics, I guess, really don't allow it. In some cases, the condition of the buildings, it isn't worthwhile. So, unfortunately. So I think the question is whether the committee wants to do 3 or 4. Now, for me, I think part of this exercise has always been about trying to get the best, bang for your buck in regards to the elementary school system. So in doing that, I think you have to have, you fall back into that 3 larger school concept where you have the K through 2 and, 3 through 5 situation. So I would like to think that we consider that. Now, what schools we decide to renovate is, I think, or build on, what sites we plan to build on is a bit of another matter. So we could do one at Greenville, we could and renovate the two better sites, I think, that are the two larger sites. I think that would be, a possibility. But we could also just stick to the sites that, have the current schools. But again, I think if geography is a consideration and where the student population is, I think we should seriously consider the Greenville site as an option. So, but that's my 2 cents. I'll wait to hear everybody else.
Well, Bill Hull, I would advocate for 4 schools, because 4 schools is
Yeah.
a different feel than big. And if you look at all the research about what the sweet spot is for educational, 700 is over that limit, where the 550 is in a better range for better educational opportunities. For the cost wise, when you say site costs and et cetera, is more than 3, but you're decreasing from 7 down to 4. So I'd like to see that delta. Where is that for? You're still going to need, principals, assistant principals, secretaries, custodians. But you're also coming out of a 7-school configuration. That's a savings. So, I think that's one of the things that we have to take a look at. But educationally, I would argue that 4 schools is far better than 3.
Unfortunately, at this point, or where we stand right now, you can go either way.
Right.
That's the good part of this. And you'll kind of circle back around to what Mark was saying of, if you go with 4 schools, which 4? As opposed to going with 3, which 3? Educationally, I think the research, as you say, shows somewhere around 500, especially in urban settings, have a tendency to work better. But typically the urban schools have less site around them. So you don't have the ability to get outside. But I think here you've got the ability to say a 500, nominally 500 student school gets you out and about pretty well on all the sites. And so you're not afraid of a parity issue where one of those sites ends up being much smaller than the others. And so if you looked at 4, then you might look at Stanton, Moriarty, Uncas, and Greenville. And that would get you good coverage on that curve population down the east side. And then Stanton over on the west side with just about the same travel distance is longer on the west side, travel time is about the same because of traffic. So I think if you consider 4, that would be the 4 that would rise to the top for me. If you consider 3, my 3 are Stanton, Moriarty, and Greenville.
Mark Kulos, you have your hand up. Thank you for being
Yes.
patient.
All right. Again, like Mark said, we're not looking at modifying any of these schools. Basically, the ideal plan is to build new schools on the sites and eventually demolish the existing buildings and then rearrange the position of the school and ball fields and whatnot. Is there any advantage, 3 schools, 4 schools, as far as reimbursement from the state, as far as percentage reimbursement, or as long as you're within those parameters of size-wise? I understand if you go with 4 schools, you don't need as large of a site as a 3-school formula. Your acreage comes down and your options open up a bit.
Yeah, Mark, this is Greg Smalley. The site work, you're right, because we're going to develop about the same amount of site for either population. Like the field doesn't get smaller because there's fewer kids, the parking lots get smaller. The building gets a little bit smaller. So I think where you start to see cost differential is in the time value of money. How long does it take you to build all the buildings? And that's what we're going to talk about next after we get done with this discussion, is how do you phase this? But if you approach it with the idea that the easiest way to facilitate it is to build new schools on your sites and take down the old ones, because frankly, none of the old ones really lend themselves to a renovation that doesn't get in the way and cost as much as a new school. So if you go at it with whatever we build will be new, then you can build without the need for swing space, because you can build on each one of those sites. So you can build at the same time 2 buildings on 2 different sites and do it in 2 phases. The third phase would be teachers, unless you do a 2-school phase and a 3-school phase. So I think your big driver on this is going to end up being the cost of money over time.
Anyone else?
And while that might be a huge driver in a time of high inflation, so, you know, the last 20 years, it didn't really matter because the inflation rate was low, but now that it's up to a historical high point, and availability of materials, the supply chain might extend out that building time. So now, like you said, the time value of money is a concern. So instead of building over a shorter length of time, you've got to extend your build time out by a couple of years or so.
You need to be very circumspect with the time that you allocate for each phase. If things change, and what we're seeing is the larger projects are having less trouble with supplies in certain areas because they know that the project is funded and moving. Small renovation projects might have more trouble than large new projects. That's probably the easiest way to say that. So let's look at some phasing, and then we can come back to what might be the approach that's most lends itself. And I will tell you before we go to the next slide, in working with Dr. Stringfellow's office, 3 schools or 4 schools are less of a concern than getting schools that have parity and are new. That's the major driver of this, I think, from the educational point of view, is to get some semblance of leveling of enrollment and some semblance of parity amongst all the buildings. So this will be a little bit difficult to read, but this is 2 phases, and this is all predicated on 3 schools. So if you go to 4, we're going to plug another school into here somewhere. So this takes from the top, Bishop Early Childhood stays where it is until the end of 2025. So we're using a 4-year window from June of 2022 to the end of 2025. So about a 3.5-year window. The K Street has already gone over to the 1812 transition. And this looks at building on Stanton and Greenville at the same time on the first phase, and those 2 schools occupied the end of phase 1, which in this case is 2025. And in that, from a base using 5% escalation, you would be forecasting about a 5.5% increase in your construction compounding 5%. So, yeah. So if you push that back out, a $10 million project is $10.5 million. And you're talking in round numbers, multiples of 10 million to build the building. So you've got a real consideration on the escalation. And then in phase 2, when you're done with phase 1 and 2 new schools come online, you would have capacity for either 1,400 or 1,000 kids, depending on how you do it. So you would, in essence, be able to close half of your buildings or 2/3 of your buildings and move them into the new buildings, which would give you the savings on operational costs at the end of phase one. And then you would do, in a re-elementary school scenario, you would do teachers memorial and the third elementary school. So teachers memorial would be an occupied school renovation. So we put that out into the second phase to give everybody time to get comfortable with it and for you to get your logistics together so it doesn't impact the curriculum as much as if it was in a first phase school. So with this, if you went with 4 schools, you could do 3 elementary schools in the first phase and then 1 in the second phase, or 2 and then 2 with teachers in a 2-phase. And in that, you would be done with construction somewhere around the beginning of 2030. So about an 8-year window to get that done and move through it. And if you, at the end of that, you'd be looking at about 6.7% annualized escalation. So you'd pick up about 7% of costs from what you project now. So where that really comes into play is when you look at your cost projections in the final, and you'll see the same building that you're building now and the same building 5 or 6 years out, and there'll be a considerable cost increase one over the other, and that's just escalation. The other factor that you can't figure into this is the cost of borrowing money. And so as inflation's going up and the Fed's trying to catch up to it, the cost of borrowing is going up. And the cost of borrowing has been historically low for municipalities for about 10 years now. And I think we're coming to the end of that, unfortunately. But it used to be extremely beneficial to borrow. So this is 3 phases. This gets us done somewhere around the end of 2031. So you're looking about a 10-year plan to do 3 phases. And in this, the driver on trying to get from 3 phases down to 2 is you extend your operational costs because you can't close any of the buildings. So you're carrying each one of those buildings, whereas on the other one, we were closing half the buildings at the end of 2025. Here we're closing 1. And then the rest of them come offline as you go further out. So this is where I think last time we said it's kind of 3-dimensional chess. You're playing the educational piece, the logistics of moving people around, and then you add in the operational cost of buildings and the cost of borrowing money. And then you fold all that in and you make a little stew out of it. Adding on those other 2 years picks up another 0.75% of escalation for just 2 years because it's compounding. So the further you push this out, the faster that goes up. And so for that first phase, you pick up about 5.5%. The last phase, you pick up almost 2% in 2 years, as opposed to about 0.25% over the first 3. So it's a tough jump when you get out past that 10-year window. And this is one that you talk about adjusting as you go. But I would be really strident about trying to do 3-year windows. People will push, some may push to get down to 3-year windows for the savings on the financial side, but the logistical side of it gets to be quite difficult. So if you do 4-year windows and find out that you have it working well internally, you could pick up that extra year. You just open in school sooner. And the sooner you open it, the sooner you take it going offline. The first phase is the one where—
Greg, Mark Koulos here. I see on your chart, you don't make any allocation for adult education. I don't know if you had that conversation with the superintendent, what they plan to do with that.
Yeah, that was Waconic. And it does need to come into here because it will need a renovation as well. Thanks, Mark. You know, I was going back through my notes and I had the 18 to 22 transition covered, and the adult ed was the one that we need. So the couple of projects, the adult ed and renovation to Huntington to move the admin in. are two other pieces that carry and will be a part of a final consideration. You can occupy Huntington on the administrative side pretty readily if you stay out of the old building. The old building has a bunch of accessibility issues. The newer part of the building could be an admin set up pretty readily. Waconik needs a fairly major renovation to come up to speed, certainly on the handicap accessibility side.
Could you use Huntington as adult ed?
Dramatically, probably. It's a big building.
It's a big building.
Yeah. You might do better to invest in the front side of the building for your administrative and just use the backside for adult ed as it is.
Actually, we had talked about having the Huntington building have an educational component other than administrative because of the possibility of reimbursement. So that was the thought there.
Yeah, you'll get
Back
some
in the old
reimbursement.
facilities committee.
Right, you'll get some reimbursement for district headquarters or district admin building, usually half of your rate. But I don't know what else you put in Huntington with the exception of adult ed.
Yeah. No, I think we were, I think we were thinking that before. So.
Any other questions? What's next?
This is good, Carol. Joe, are we looking at going for this entire thing to be approved and phasing? Or are we going for a referendum for like 2 schools, then another referendum for 2 schools? What's the,
I think, and again, this is just my thought on this,
Okay.
right? But I think because of the scope and scale of this project, that it's going to be multiple referenda.
Yeah, if I could on that one.
I don't think that bond council will allow us to commit to a certain number now that over a project that's going to take 9 years to finish because of the cost of borrowing monies.
so theoretically, then you could get the referendum, say to renovate or build 2 new schools. And then the next time you go for a referendum, it may not pass.
That is the
So
risk.
therefore, the plan.
Falls apart.
Yeah.
It's like
But
you have
that's
to
always
keep-
been the risk here.
Right, you gotta get, and the cost of, like, Greg said, the cost of money. So is it possible to get a referendum for concept approval, not construction approval?
Jim.
Jim, yeah, let Jim address
If I
that.
can on that
They've got a
front.
lot more experience than I do.
We've had a lot of experiences in similar circumstances, the city here, where you have multiple needs. The idea of addressing them all at once is an impossibility. We find that it's very important to show an overarching concept as a master plan. Here's how we're going to get from point A to point B over, pick the schedule as Greg just laid out. 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever the master plan is, but then identify this project or projects makes most sense as the first initiative. And these are the dollars that are being asked for today. As you're suggesting, that doesn't give you any leverage going forward other than you've done really good work. You get a project in the ground and people see that you're competent in getting it taken care of and you're addressing need. And there's that impetus in the city to desire to continue that effort. Let's do that and continue. We've just gone through this full cycle with South Windsor. They redid their entire elementary school system. It was previously a 5-school system. They brought it down to a 4-school system. We did an overarching master plan at the outset. The initial intent was 2 new buildings, 2 renos. They took it off as a single project in the first phase, 2 projects taken together in the second phase, and a single project in the third phase. When we did the first project, and the community saw the outcome, there was a lot of desire within the community, rather than do the next two as renovation, to see if it was possible to do them as new construction. And they were able to put together the numbers based on their experience of the delta in dollars wasn't that great. And it made a lot of sense educationally. So that was one community storyline kind of running through the same arc, or a similar arc.
I think it's fair to say that South Windsor, Groton did the same thing, is you revisit the plan.
Yep.
Before you get to the next phase. And what you're really trying to get from the plan is the basis of how the facilities support education. Too often these get down to, well, that costs a lot of money. When you get to the second phase, it was, whoa, that's a lot of money. It's not to say that if your next phase says perhaps we should renovate, you know, something's come up and we want to renovate, the state may offer you more money to renovate, whatever it is. Come back and visit it in the light of what you're trying to accomplish educationally. And so that's, as Joseph, just, you're always selling this thing. You're always reminding people, this is what we did. And this is why we did it. Groton came back and revisited for the middle schools. You know, they had 13 elementary schools and our plan took them down to 5, ultimately, I think it was. And from 3 middle schools down to 1. And so it's just a matter of how you get there. And they revisited the middle school piece because originally it was supposed to come down to 2. And they came back and said, we're not really comfortable with 2 because we can't serve our population right. So I think if you set off from here and say, let's run a 4-school plan with a 500 student population target on these 4 sites. And then you're just down to phasing because you've got 4 elementary schools to build, a middle school to renovate, a adult education building to renovate. So you've got 6 projects. And then we'll take that and work with our cost estimators and come back and say, here's what you're projecting. Here's what we think the cost would be for phase 1 with 3 buildings in it. And here's the cost for phase 2 with 3 buildings in it. Here's the cost for a 3-phase setup, 2 schools, 2 schools, 2 schools. And that would give you the ability to say, phasing wise, we think given current economic conditions, we should start this as a 2-phase plan and build 3 schools in the first phase. Doesn't mean you can't go to 2 additional phases with fewer schools in the future.
Now, this is Greg Carabine. When you say you go to your estimators, are they going to give you a parametric estimate? How granular?
It will be a rough order of magnitude on certain parts of it. And that's why we put the concept floor plan on all the sites. So it gives them something to work from for continuity.
So it'll be a square foot cost.
Yeah,
It's a square foot cost with issues of topography, site condition, et cetera, brought into it. And that's, as Greg is saying, that was the idea of wanting to put something more than a box of X amount of square feet on a site, but rather we gave them an idea of where the gym might be, where the cafeteria, where the main entrance is, and what opportunities you have within the building to handle grade, because that's going to be a big driver in a lot of these potential sites. You have 5% and greater grades on several of the sites that are attractive.
Now, going from your estimates in the past, so you're going to give us a order of magnitude. Okay, based on your past experience, how close is your order of magnitude to reality that actually happens?
I'm close.
Okay.
We use two sources. The Mass School Building Authority tracks all of their buildings, and so we can get everything out of their end. And Connecticut and Massachusetts are getting to be a lot closer cost-wise. And Connecticut tracks all of its building costs, just a little bit more esoteric to get to it than Massachusetts is. But with those, our cost estimators very heavily on the contracting side as well, so they understand logistics and phasing and whatnot. So we'll take what they come back with, compare that to historical trending in both Connecticut and Mass as the check, and then it will be what anyone projects cost-wise going forward. I used 5%. There's cost estimators now that are using 7 or 8%, but I wouldn't use 7 or 8% over 10 years. That's the historical, 5% is a good historical escalation rate. It's on a 10-year plan, you'll probably end up somewhere close to that.
Need a motion to move forward?
Well,
I'll make a motion.
What are we, all right, what are we motioning on though? Are we motioning on?
Okay.
Well,
The mo-
let Bill speak.
The motion is that we do a 4-school concept with Moriarty, Uncas, Greenville, and Stanton.
A second.
Well, call for discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And was everyone able to hear Bill Hull? Everyone's nodding, I hope. Okay, so I'll open the floor to discussion on his motion.
Stacy?
Hello, yes.
Yeah, it's the mayor. I just have a question that would apply to any proposal, 4 or 3. In looking at phase 1 and phase 2 schedule, does that incorporate the 2-year notice to the school construction grant program that the state operates that's required to give them notice that we're prepared to seek the funding 2 years after each referendum passes? Is that built into this schedule?
It is, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
On the discussion, so I was under the impression at the beginning of the meeting that I thought I heard that we wouldn't make this 3 or 4 decision tonight unless we felt confident that our next public information session has us going in that direction.
I think your best bet on the next public information center is to go and saying, here's where the committee thinks we should go.
That's a fair point.
And see what public comment comes back. Mostly because in order to get to what the mayor was just talking about, that's your June driver date, is that time for OSCGR. So if we start to push too far back, if we get to, I'll back up a second. If we set up the next meeting as a working session with the public and no one shows up, then we are where we're sitting right now. If we go in there saying, hey, in all the meetings, we think for schools in these locations with these amenities is the right plan for the city. And then it says to the public, if you disagree, let us know.
But at least there's conversation to be had. Right. Okay. All right, it's fair. Thank you.
Anyone else have? I'm looking for anybody who's got their hand raised or would like to say something. Cindy?
I don't see any hands up.
So speak now or forever hold your, no.
Yeah.
All right, so this is Mark Kulas. Let me just recap. So what we're looking at right now is renovation of teachers in the future and a 4-school elementary school scheme to replace our existing 7. And however, one of those elementary schools, Huntington, would eventually be renovated and used for administration, other offices, possibly adult ed. So essentially we're left with 4 new elementary schools, 1 renovated elementary school, and 2 renovated as new middle schools. Does that sound right to everyone?
No, we're not, only 1 middle school is being touched. We're not touching Kelly.
Well, yeah, right. I know we're going to renovate 1, but the other one has been renovated.
It'll be 20 years old by the time
the
this episode's
timeline
done.
is in the 2030s. The renovation to Kelly will be at least 20 years old at that point. And we may
Right,
have
but we're
to
not-
consider. We're not
Well,
considering touching that
Not
at this
considering
point.
that at this point in time.
Right.
That's not in our,
The next school building committee.
the next school, the 2040 school building committee will be thinking about that. No, what we're talking
Right,
about
yeah.
is Moriarty, Stanton, Uncas, Greenville, renovating Huntington for administration and adult education, and a occupied renovation of Teachers Middle School.
Correct.
Okay, Peter Gauthier, you would like to,
Peter
And then-
Goth, yeah, he's got a mic issue, so, if it could, if I could, address the committee.
okay,
It's Mark Betancourt again. The, so I think they both, either side really has some merit, their own arguments for and against as far as, the benefits. I honestly believe that while, a smaller school is nice, I think when we start getting down to brass tacks and we have 4 schools instead of, say, 3 elementary schools, I think we start losing something in the curriculum when it's more spread out. So personally, I lean more towards a 3-school concept. But with all that said, the money here is kind of important. So I would like to see us look for a 3 and a 4 school number, as far as what our costs would. I agree with what the schools would be. Obviously, the 3, I would say, Stanton and Moriarty first, and then Uncas third. But Greenville would be third actually, and then Uncas as a 4th. So that's the basic order I would do it in, that group of 3, and then Uncas if we do 4 school concept. So I want to know what people think of that personally, before we go ahead and commit to just a 4 school concept.
we already have a motion on the floor for the 4 schools.
Request a vote. Request a vote.
Is it possible to still say something?
Yes,
You're in discussion.
we're in discussion.
No,
Right.
actually, you have an amendment.
Because you
have
made
an
a
amendment.
motion, that's why I'm asking if I can speak.
Well, is there so Mark,
Is he making-
So I would like to, an amendment would be too different than the original motion, though, I think. So I would like to discard that motion or either table it. I'll motion to table the motion only to allow us to consider a 3 and 4 proposal. Getting numbers on 3 and 4 for that purpose.
well, we have a motion and a second for the 4 school option. So that either has to be voted up or down before we can take
No,
up.
we can table that motion and then consider the other situation.
So why don't we do that by vote?
So we can consider we can bring up the 4 school option later if it comes to that. I'm not saying make a commitment either way here, but I think we need numbers on both of them.
There was a
There's
motion.
to table the motion, the motion that's been made, so you have to vote on the motion to table it.
Is there
Well,
second on the
yeah.
motion to take?
If you have a motion and second,
Yeah,
The
if there's no second to table, then it doesn't get tabled. So there's no vote to take.
Okay. So we'll go back to Greg's original motion.
Bill's.
I'm sorry.
Blame it on me.
No one's knocked you off the chair.
You were right with me.
I am.
Right with me. All right, so we'll go back to Bill's original motion. And by roll call vote, we're voting this up or down. Everyone in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start with the people who are in the Zoom. Or Christine, did you have?
I still
question or
had,
comment?
yes, I had still, that's why I asked if I could still say something. My concern that I expressed earlier, is a very strong one regarding the students on the east side in the Laurel Hill neighborhood, as far as location of any kind of school that we build, because I'm just trying to picture those kids being bused all the way up to Stanton or to Greenville, and the time element and everything. And it is of great concern to me.
You currently have students going from Sandy Lane over to Uncas,
Yes,
right?
but
So
yeah,
that's just about,
Probably just as long.
just as
yeah,
long
but
as.
that also is something that should be changed. You know what I mean? Right now, we have kids that travel way too far. We have a new transportation coordinator that was hired, so I don't know if she's worked on the bus routes and making them more expeditious, but I would be interested to hear her
Christine,
input.
with all due respect, we're not here to discuss what the bus routes are presently.
Oh, I know. I'm just thinking about the kids and how far they have to go.
Well,
Okay.
Christine, some of those kids are bused. This is Mark Kulos.
Yeah, I
They're
know.
bused to the STEAM schools by their own election to Waquanic and
Yeah, but that's by
Moriarty.
choice. But that's by choice, Mark. You know.
All right,
Yeah, but they are still bused, so a
Yeah, I
portion
know,
of
but
those
it's still by
students.
choice. And some
Correct.
of those kids are probably getting driven.
all right, Christine and Mark, with all due respect.
Yep, we're all set.
I know,
You
yeah,
want to discuss
we're on the
that's
motion.
You may do that, but we're not discussing bus routes at this time. So we'll start with the people who are in the Zoom, and I hope I have everybody. Christine DeSasio,
Yes.
okay? Mark Kulos,
No,
Mark Bettencourt,
No,
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes.
It's three, right? Three yeses?
correct.
Okay.
Okay, is that, do I have, how about Peter Gauthier? I know you're having microphone trouble.
Peter votes no, according to the chat. He's in chat.
and on
Okay,
the motion for 4 schools, I vote no.
Mark Kulos?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that was Peter Gauthier. I was reading his chat.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank
Peter's
you.
chat was on the motion for 4 schools. I vote no.
Thank you. Okay, and then here in the room, we have Joe DeLucia,
Yes.
William Hull,
Yes.
Greg Carabine,
Yes.
and Stacy Gould votes yes. So the motion carries 7-3. So we have our direction for DRA. Thank you. What's next, gentlemen?
Your next public meeting, which we were talking about doing as a presentation of draft. Just timeline.
How much time do you need to put this plan together so that we can talk to the Board of Ed? Are we going to plan it again to do an informational at Kelly? We want to do it someplace else? I realize that the turnout, while I appreciate the 3 people who did show up, it was disappointing. And so we have to do a better job of getting the information out, whether it's through the newspaper, the radio, Facebook. The Board of Education has the ability to contact every parent who has a child in the school system, across the district. They're going to have to be our partners to get this information out often,
Early and often.
early and often, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, 2 days, 5 days before, 2 days before, the day of, et cetera,
Yeah.
to really get a good cross-section of the public at this next informational. That is paramount for any of this to move forward, is that we have to have buy-in from the people who we're impacting, which is everyone who lives in the city of Norwich. And we're looking to, better our schools for our students.
What's your council date?
First and third Mondays.
Stacy?
If you did some-
Yes, Christine?
No, I just want to mention, we did reach out to Amber regarding what was done, to get the information out about that meeting, and everything was done that could be done on their end.
I'm
So,
not saying that they didn't do it, but
yeah,
I said we as the collective
yeah,
body have to do a better job for the next one.
yeah. But you mentioned that they have the ability to reach every family, and they did, I just wanted to make sure you knew that. That's all.
No, I completely understand, but they have the ability to reach every parent who has a child enrolled in our school system.
Yeah, they did. They tried. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
the problem, the people we heard from, told us that they didn't even hear about it from the school system. That was the problem. So.
Yeah,
Right,
I don't
so-
know. Yeah, I still don't understand that, Mark, either, because remember we exchanged on
Yeah,
email about that, because Amber said it was sent out unless there was a failure in the system somehow.
yeah, the only thing they did on social media was the day of the meeting, and that isn't,
Yeah,
to be
that was
honest with
supposed
you,
to
that's
be
good
a
enough.
sec.
That isn't
Right,
good
she
enough.
said
Alright,
that
so
was the
we have-
second one.
We as a collective group have to do better for the next time.
Well, if you give me the details, I'll write a press release. And then Mark, it probably should come from you, that press release going out
Yep,
into the media from you. I can I'll bring it to the committee. You can, cut it up and do what you want with it, and then we can send it out.
yeah, I think it would be incumbent upon us all, anyone that has any social media accounts and stuff like that, to post this stuff and start sharing it. I've been laying off of social media lately myself, but probably time to start getting back into it, I guess. Just because for no other reason this.
For a further item on the agenda, I think maybe we take a look at a public relations subcommittee out of this committee to help drive that, either social media, regular media, et cetera. So, but that's for a future date.
Right, I think our first meeting should be in one central location. We get as many people as there as we can, and then if need be, or should be, that we take this, excuse me, to the senior center, we get something out through Parks and Recreation. We reach out to church groups, volunteer fire departments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if we have to set up a booth somewhere, then that's what we do. But I think this next one should be organized at one location where we have this all set up for people to see.
Stacy, if I could, typically what you'll see is this coming meeting will be the run through of the draft. You would then go to the city council for adoption of the report of the plan. Then you would go into these public meetings of, okay, here's where we're going as a city, get on board to help us understand what you need to know. So you're going in the right direction. What I'm concerned with is if we pick a date for June, that tomorrow, that starts getting advertised for this third meeting. So if we were aiming for the end of June, if you bounce over to the first Monday in July, it's the 4th of July. So I don't think the council is going to meet.
They'll meet the 5th.
Yeah.
They'll meet
So-
there.
So our June meetings are on the 6th and the 20th, right?
Okay.
We talked about having the report, right? The resolution says having the report submitted, right, which essentially in City Hall on the
Right.
30th.
Okay.
On the 30th of June, right? So our first council meeting in July is the 5th, and then our second is the 18th. It's my, vision and hope that we'll schedule an informational, right? So that it's not just a report that gets handed to the council, but that you're making a presentation. Right.
Yeah, typically it would be a full-blown, all singing, all dancing, here's where we started, here's where we finished, report of this committee to the council.
And you also do it to the Board of Ed.
Yeah, you would typically either bring them in, do a joint meeting, or you meet Board of Ed prior to it. Board of Ed would say, yeah, we agree, and send it in. So what would, if we could look at, if you looked at early on the week of the 20th for this group to have this public meeting, that would give us time to get a draft pulled together and get it into the hands of the committee members, so that you're not seeing it for the first time when we get there.
So, well, I'm going to say that I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about this committee hitting the deadline of June 30th. And meaningful. Well, I say a meaningful way, but I mean a report and presentation and a set of decisions that feels finished, right? So.
Would you pull back to the week of the 13th?
Well, no. I'm not trying to move you up. I'm saying that we may not be able to hit that date that we set, that the council set, right? So the conversation starts to become, okay, how does that handle everything downstream, right? Or impact everything downstream. But let's take one thing at a time. So the next public meeting, I don't think that the location was a hindrance. I think Kelly is a perfect
No,
place.
I think it's a
for it
good
to
place.
have,
No,
right. So the whole thing works. So it wasn't like it wasn't attendance there because of where it was.
No, I was not trying to.
No, I wasn't taking
intimate
that way. I'm
that
just
at
saying,
all.
because Greg asked, do it, continue to do it at Kelly House. Why not? So let's get that locked down, and then we can talk about the timeline as it, as it plays out.
Greg, what do you need?
Well, I'm just gonna, let me just finish what I was gonna say. I guess I'm still nervous about us getting our first referendum into the Secretary of State's office by the deadline in order for it to be on November's ballot. I'm nervous about that, right?
When is the
What's the drop dead date for that?
September 1st.
So the last meeting in August, essentially.
Correct.
Unless you schedule a special.
Still gives you time for bond council to ratify and affirm the language.
Still gotta, get it written.
Yep.
Mark Kulos here. We could also get the word out. I mean, there's a lot of events happening the first full week of June at practically all the schools. They're having concerts or art displays or something as far as the elementary schools. There's the combined middle school graduation, which is going to be on the 16th at Dodge Stadium. So you have a captive audience there. And then last day of school, I believe, is the 21st. So there are plenty of opportunities to inform the public in mass where parents are actually going to be in the schools to know about these dates, the date of, a presentation. So there are plenty of opportunities to actually give people those dates in person.
Go ahead, Greg.
This is Greg Carroll. This is for Greg. We've given you guidance on what we'd like. What is your timeline to provide us what we need?
Well, we had looked at the week of the 20th to engage with the public, which would give you a chance to meet on the week prior.
Okay, our normal meeting is the 17th, right?
June?
Yes.
No, it's this 21st.
21st, yeah. It's late.
If you set the 21st as the public engagement meeting and we got you the draft the week prior to it, then we could at least start to field questions internally.
If this committee had a special meeting, say on the Tuesday, the 14th or something in the week of the 13th. So we could see what you've got to put together and then have the public meeting on the 21st at Kelly.
The 14th is the regularly scheduled BOE meeting in June.
Okay, so maybe that's the perfect time for them to put DRA on their schedule, and we have a joint meeting to discuss, because this certainly impacts the Board of Education. And I would think that maybe they would be willing to modify whatever is on their agenda or give some time or an hour's worth of time to DRA to make this presentation to the BOE and the School Facilities Committee.
Right, absolutely, because I would, just one member of the council, I would not want to be voting to adopt this if it hasn't been presented to the Board of Ed.
So Mark or Christine, as BOE members, do you think that we can get on their agenda?
Oh, absolutely. Right, Mark?
Yeah, well, I'll have to call
Yeah. Bob?
Chairman Aldi and then get together with the superintendent. We do have an agenda set meeting usually,
A week
let's see,
before.
a week before on the 7th. But, you know, we'll get the ball rolling this week so that we have notice of it.
So can you get DRA and the School Facilities Committee on for 1 hour onto that agenda?
School building committee.
Well, the school
there should be
building,
no
but
reason-
DRA would give the
Oh,
The
sorry, School
presentation.
building, I'm sorry. The word, wrong word.
Maybe.
Oh, committee. It's all right.
well, DRA would give a presentation is that correct?
Right. DRA would be making a presentation to the BOE, and the School Building Committee would be there as well. Because
All
we
right,
are,
would you think that the Kelly Community Room would be big enough, or would we have to move it to the auditorium?
for the BOE, for the joint meeting, or you talking about the
Right,
21st?
on the 14th.
Well, how many
Because you
people?
want to incorporate this as part of our regular meeting, or do you want to have a special meeting?
No, I'm trying to incorporate this into your regular meeting, and then the 21st would be the meeting of the public to come in and see what we've hopefully decided.
All right.
Well, again, we're getting down in the weeds here, but I would just say the auditorium, just in case we draw a crowd, right? Right, let's be. safe.
Yeah, it's just, you know, as far as, yeah, we can do it because we've done presentations in the auditorium before.
Okay, so let's pick the auditorium.
So
All right.
I'm more concerned about what you're actually going to present to the Board of Ed. Will it be pretty much what's going to be presented to the public on the 21st,
Yes.
right? That would seem to make sense.
Yeah.
Because nothing's really done until we have that meeting on the 21st, right?
Yeah,
We're gonna get it.
may I say something? Mr. Smalley, is it possible to have some kind of a poster board made up that we can put on display in all the schools and that in the main office areas regarding that public meeting? Can your office come up with something like that that gives the brass tacks of what's going on?
The problem is, Christine, with that, it's not like, parents are not really allowed in. They're just picking up students
No, in the main
outside the
office, Mark,
schools.
but they have to sign out their kids in the main office.
Yeah,
They are signing their kids out. I've seen them at Kelly. So we could have it on display in the main offices.
well, at least an announcement of the meeting, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
I
they
think
do that.
I think DRA can come up with something that would fit on a
Because we're gonna be here all
piece of
night.
paper, and that the schools could print that out and post it in the office.
Yeah.
This
it's
is Greg,
just-
this is Greg Carabine. We're having a lot of discussion on basically how to publicize this. It was talked about earlier, having a subcommittee to
Mhm.
work on publicizing that. I'd like to make a motion that a subcommittee be set up to do that, because everyone's got great ideas, but it'd be nice to have it, a smaller group to present it to a larger group.
Consisting
my
of who?
recommendation-
You need to name the
Consist-
members.
Oh. How many, were you posing, how many people you think you need on that committee?
I would say 4. And what I would recommend doing is having, say, probably 4, it could be larger, but I'd recommend having at least equal representation from both the Board of Ed and from the building committee. That way there we're crossing both the technical side and the Board of Education side. So I'd recommend, say, having 2 members from each group on, I'll call it a publicizing group, for lack of a better term. And then the 4 members could then work on the best method of getting the information out.
Okay, so I'll second the motion.
For discussion?
Under discussion, I would just say, so we have 2 members of the Board of Ed. So all 4 members of this Public Relations Committee should come from this building committee.
Yes,
We have Board of Ed members, at least one of them should be one of the 4,
yes,
is what you're getting at.
yes.
Like, perfect.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so,
Is there further discussion on Greg's motion to create
No,
a subcommittee?
I just wanted to propose, I'm hoping that Cindy volunteers because she's got a great connection with all the schools, but I don't know if she has time to do this.
I don't mind.
create it, then people can volunteer. How's that?
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't mind.
Let's get through the creation of the committee.
Right, so is there any further discussion on the motion to create a
Just-
4-member?
Just who is going to be on the committee, that's all. I mean, Cindy's volunteered, it sounds like. Who else is
All right,
volunteering?
once we get through the motion to create the committee, then we can ask for volunteers. And there was a suggestion that 1 member of the committee be from the BOE
Mhm.
or school attached to the school somehow.
School employee.
School employee, thank you, Bill. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion before us? Seeing nobody's hand raised, I'll start with the people in the room here. Joe DeLucia,
Yes.
Bill Hull,
Yes.
Greg Carabine,
Yes,
Stacy Gould votes yes. I'll go to the people who are in the Zoom.
Peter
Mark-
Gauthier voted yes.
Okay, Peter Gauthier votes yes. Mark Kulos,
Yes.
Mark Betancourt,
Yes, and Peter also said that he'd volunteer to serve.
Christine DeStacio.
Yes.
Okay, did I say Cindy? I'm sorry.
Yes,
Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you. So if you'd like to volunteer for the committee, send a note to Mark Betancourt.
All right, well, I'll volunteer right now because I also sit on the agenda set committee, so it would seem that I would be the ideal person to do that.
I would gladly let you be the Board of Ed representative, Mark. I have
Thank you,
too much on my
Christine.
plate. I have too much on my plate and a granddaughter to want, I want to see.
Right.
Okay,
I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned.
well, before, I just want to ask if there's anything else that,
Right now, I've got this meeting 6:14 at a joint meeting between this committee and the Board of Ed, 6:21 with a third public meeting, and a tentative 7:05 with the city council.
Mark, your meeting starts at what time?
5:30.
5:30. So do you think?
5:30,
you
so,
want-
but we can schedule that hour, you know, towards the beginning of the meeting, towards the end of the meeting, or whatever you prefer. If, you know, 5:30 is too early for
We'd
you.
like to be on the 5, we want to be on at 5:35.
All right,
Okay, and then we're going to do,
and you say that presentation would be approximately 1 hour?
1 hour.
All right,
Yes. Okay, and then we'll have on the 21st, we'll have an informational at Kelly Middle School. Okay, is there anything else to be brought before the committee before we call for adjournment? Hearing and seeing. Peter Gauthier wants to know, are we going to meet before the 21st? We're going to have a joint meeting on June 14th, Peter.
that'll be at the Kelly Community Room. I mean, the auditorium.
Auditorium.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna make it at the auditorium.
Okay. Peter, does that? What? No, there will be no meeting before the 14th.
But you will have that report beforehand to look at, correct?
Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn at 8:33. Do this by roll call. Mark Kulos,
Yes.
Mark,
If it's me, yes. Cut out. What happened? Oh, Greg got dropped.
They lost their Zoom link, I think.
Yeah, Greg dropped.
Maybe we ran out of time. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
Somebody hit a wire.
Go ahead, Mark.
There we go. All right, yes, motion to adjourn, yes.
Wow.
Cindy Beauregard,
Yes.
Christine DeStacio,
Yes.
Bill Hall.
And Peter Gauthier is yes.
Thank you. Greg
Good night,
Carabin,
everyone.
Joe DeLucia,
Yes.
Stacy Gould votes yes. Good night, everyone, and thank you. 8:30.
Okay. And Mark,
Yes.
what I can do is email you. I got to talk to Bob Alda. I'm going to call him right
Yeah.
now.
All right,
All right.
and just CC us, and we'll be on the same page. Cindy,
I'll shoot
Cindy,
you an
you're
email.
in for the meeting for the other piece, and Peter Gauthier is in for that. So I'll send unless there's somebody else that's interested, that'll consist of the committee members, I think.
Yeah, myself, Cindy, and Peter.
Peter Gauthier, yeah, and myself,
All
I
right.
guess.
And
So it is,
You'll
I could just set up a Zoom for us to get together and chat about it.
all right. All right, I'll have to send you my
Sounds good.
schedule. It's pretty tight with meetings and
This choice.
Actually, the following week would be better.
All right, whatever. Well, just let me know what your availability is.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Cindy, the same.
Okay.
To discuss a super school.
All right. Peter, too. All right, everybody, take it easy.
Central office.
Bye, guys.
The wheel coming off it. Good night. Moriarty.
So now that's why on 14, they're gonna be back to full school.
Correct.
And it's gonna be a whole, basically, now, are you voting at that?
No, it's going to the Board of Ed, so it's a presentation. So they have to.
They have to vote.
So the board, so we're at, the purpose of the presentation is to get the approval of the Board of Ed.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
Yep.
Okay, so once the Board of Ed
Says
approves,
yes.
then that's what's gonna be presented on the 21st.
Correct. If the Board of Ed says this plan does, we feel that this plan doesn't work, then we're back to the drawing board. But
And then there's no sense, then it would happen this year.
No, we'd have to, it goes on hold, because you have to hit that deadline.
right, if you don't hit the
And
deadline,
that's what, this is my spirit, final life.
right.
And that's why.
It's been boring. I mean, I need 2 meetings 5 nights a week instead of 3 nights a week.
Specific contract. Yeah, you can't keep changing it. 3, 4.
I understand. I completely understand.
You almost did a good job before you. Almost.